you know. But he would have had a very difficult time
Yes.
um, watching me,
Yes.
letting me go, freeing me
Yes.
to go to do what I had to do. The very work that he had trained me and raised me and formed me to do. Um, and so it's very interesting that the day this Greensboro sit-in occurred 5 days before my father's death, and I've kind of understood. Leon Sullivan said to me, he counseled me about that because it was very hard to give him up. Um, Prathia, you've got to remember that your father died that you might live. I didn't understand that at the time, and I didn't want to understand
Yes,
it.
yes,
I
yes.
wanted to tell Leon Sullivan a few things I wouldn't have been allowed to say. But over the years, that has come to mean something to me. And so it was my mother who, in 1962, after going down in the spring to the SNCC conference and coming back and knowing that it wouldn't be long before I would be there, go back, it was time for me to go south. Um, we had been doing all of this support work for SNCC, and we had, in 1961, we were involved in a kind of northern flank freedom ride. It was quite a large organization of students organized by the NAACP in Baltimore. And we rode into Baltimore and Annapolis and the eastern shore of Maryland. And so that was a part of that movement on the eastern shore. And that's where I was arrested for the first time while I was in college in Annapolis. But after that, in 1962, I wanted then to go to the Deep South. And my mother said to me, I was almost graduating from college, and she said, well, why can't you just get a regular job? Why can't you just be a teacher, Or, and I didn't answer her. And then she said to me, well, since you must go, God keep you. And
Yes.
I am,
Yes.
to this very day, grateful to my mother, because I know that that was the hardest thing
Yes.
that she ever had to do.
Yes.
My father would not have been able to do it,
Yes.
but she knew that I had to go.
Why did you have to go?
I couldn't have not gone. I couldn't help myself. I couldn't help myself. This was the moment. Greensboro was the signal. It was 1960. That's what you're supposed to be doing. It was a part of that knowing God as I know myself.
Yes.
At age 4 or something like that, and knowing that I had been born to struggle,
Yes.
and that this was everything that I believed in, that it was God's work, that it was God's movement, and that I had to go.
Okay. Sudarshan,
I'm sorry,
would you
I
like to
tear
come in?
up over all of this
That's
stuff.
what the teardrops are for, sister. Yeah. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
The year you were born was very special. You didn't tell us. You tell us when were you
Purposely
born?
didn't.
Shame on you. I'm not Shiraj, right? You want to get all in my business now. The year that I was born was 1940.
1940. Yeah. Where did you go when you joined the movement?
I went to, well, I went to Atlanta first. A friend of mine, a white girl from high school and college, from the Fellowship House group, and I went down first to take supplies that we had been collecting in Philadelphia, and no, I'm sorry, I got this out of order. It's so hard, it's so long ago, but I went first in late August of
61?
the 62,
62.
late August of 62. And I went to the Atlanta office. Actually, I got a ride with someone who was taking courses at Temple at the time and was not going a part of the movement, but was driving there and was willing to let me ride down with his family. And so I rode down with this family, went to the Atlanta office, just showed up there like a lot of other people later did.
Can I
And
just ask you to hold it for a moment? Please, those of you who are listening to Prathia, when you hear about the Atlanta office of SNCC, imagine a room about 1/3 the size of this one.
yes.
That was the Atlanta office of SNCC, out of which so much tremendous power came for the whole nation. Please.
Yeah, rather dismal, dingy kind of place. But anyway, I showed up, and this was the office. And the only people around at the time were Julian Bond and Mary King. And so the first thing that had to be done, they had to find a place for me to stay. I ended up staying with Mrs. Bond, with Julian's mother, for about a week, I think. And she was, of course, a very gracious woman. And coming to the SNCC office every day and kind of being oriented, learning about what they were doing and where people were working and that kind of thing. And I did that for 2 weeks. And then I guess a few others came in, and it was time to ship a group out. Jim Foreman, who was the executive director, returned from some trip from the field, and a group of us, 2 or 3 of us, I think, went to Southwest Georgia, where Charles Sherrod was the project director.
You said something about the influence of your community growing up in Philadelphia, and also the deep influence your parents had. The movement in its modern form started in 1955, and Dr. King was a major figure on the scene. What kind of an impact that had on you?
Well, my group, my Fellowship House group, was very involved as a study group. We studied Gandhi. We followed the movement in Montgomery. We did a lot of reading, and so and Dr. King came frequently to Fellowship House. He was a frequent visitor and speaker. So we had a wonderful learning opportunity as teenagers, which prepared us. We held our own nonviolent workshops. And then 2 of us actually went south, and we were very much impacted by Dr. King's speeches, by reading Stride Toward Freedom, by his sermons. by Howard Thurman. I was, I had, this was not something new, though. As a child, my father took me to hear Paul Robeson and Mordecai Johnson and the great speakers and preachers and religious leaders of our time. So hearing Dr. King he was a continuation of that line, but the movement, and I remember, I remember taking my father to hear Dr. King, that he had taken me as a child, to hear all these leaders, and then I took him. So we studied the nonviolent ethic. We studied nonviolence as a philosophy, and made a strong commitment.
How difficult was it to accept the philosophy of nonviolence, given the oppression?
I don't think it was difficult to accept on a philosophical plane. It was not difficult to accept. It was not incompatible with Christian thought and witness. And certainly Dr. King articulated it out of the love ethic of Jesus, and which is one of the things that he so marvelously did for black Christians, was that he articulated this philosophy, and he articulated it out of what they already understood. And so that was not difficult. What was difficult was to live it. That's the challenge.
And what kinds of difficulties did you encounter?
We had to learn the discipline. And of course, as we prepared for that Eastern Shore Freedom Ride, we had the practice sessions where, we would strike each other and all of that, curse each other, and so that we would test, build up the discipline not to strike back. But there are two levels here. There's the building the kind of stamina of it's not just a physical discipline. It's a mental and a spiritual discipline that allows one to control one's natural anger. Anger is natural, it's real. So we tested ourselves, we worked at that. But, and we knew also that one of the factors was that if one of us blew it, a lot was hanging on our discipline. So if it had just been the two of us engaged in an altercation, I wouldn't have thought that there was so much at stake. But this wasn't private. And if there's anything that you grew up with, if you grew up black in America, you grew up with the race on your back. You carried the whole race. Everything you did, if you did it well, you did it for the race. You made the race proud of you. And if you did it poorly, you embarrassed the race. And so, in this sense, the extension of that was that the movement, the cause was dependent upon our being able to carry out the discipline. Now, on the other level, there was the challenge of the love ethic of Jesus, and the learning to love your enemies, and that was much harder. And I have to say today, in this awesome assembly of theological students and those who care about these issues, that I have never been quite sure how well I succeeded. Because I learned that there is a thin line between compassion and contempt. And I mean that I was trying to love, you know. But when you were in the real thing, when you were in the thick of the struggle and you were being clubbed or you were being spat upon or you were just being harassed and called, you know, every name but a child of God, you could look into the faces of the people who were screaming at you and cursing you. And so many times at these demonstrations, there would be young white rowdies doing the slugging and all of that. But right behind them, there would be women with children. And their faces contorted with hatred. I mean, veins bulging, blood red, twisted with hate. Now, when I look into the face of that, it's easy not to hate, because I don't. It is in my self-interest not to become what I see. You see, and so I'm never quite sure if, you know, if what I did, or because love is more than a feeling. But I'm not sure I could feel sorry for them. But I also, what I saw was so revolting, so repulsive, that I knew, and I certainly learned in the movement that the jailer has to stay in jail. You know, that hate destroys not just the object of the hatred, but the subject of the hatred. And so I knew I didn't want, I cared more about my soul than to allow that poison inside me. And in that sense, I'm never quite sure, I can never quite say that I succeeded.
What was your community now that you were away from home?
Sudarshan,
Yeah.
could I check something with Prathia about that, just that
Okay.
line that she's been on? Because it's a wonderfully honest line. I really appreciate it so much. Do you remember a story that you told some of us once about the sheriff who was shooting? Do you remember what it was that you were feeling at that time? Maybe you could tell that story and then try to think about where you were coming from at that point.
We were in Sasser, Georgia. You talked about Sasser, Georgia yesterday, and we were registering people to vote. There was a group of 4 of us, a white man and a white woman, a black man and a black woman were our group. And we looked down the road and we saw this pickup truck bolting down the road, just kicking up dust. And the truck careened to a stop in front of us. And this little man got out. His face was blood red. He had a little tin badge on his chest. And he said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "We're registering people to vote. And you have no right to stop us." At which point, he became just catatonic. He began to foam at the mouth. to curse me with names some I had never heard before or since. Then, without any warning, he whipped out a gun from this holster at his side and just began firing, splash, splat, splat. I could hear the sparks of the bullets, and he just, until he emptied his gun in a circle of bullets around my feet. I think the answer to what I was feeling at that point was nothing. I was numb. And I think that was a gift from God. That because if I had moved one muscle, I would have given him the excuse he wanted to raise the gun point blank and fire. So I wasn't even, I was not brave, I was not courageous. Don't be confused about this. I was numb. And once he had emptied the gun, then he snatched us and we were taken to this little place that wasn't as big as this table, and it was two sides to it. It was the filthiest, cruddiest, vermin-infested hole I have ever seen in my life, and that's where we were imprisoned. And the order of their priorities was very clear. We were not separated according to sex, we were separated according to race. So the black man and black woman stood in one hole, and the white man and the white woman stood in the other hole until people missed us, I guess, And
Prathia, maybe you were numb, and maybe you were just being held.
Oh, I think so. In fact, I know that's right.
All right.
I know that's
Right.
right. I know that's right. I know. That's what religion, that's what Christian faith means in a time like that.
Yes.
I believe that my numbness was a gift from God that saved my life, and that I didn't move. I know that I was held because there were other times when we had to operate out of fear. You talked a little bit about fear yesterday, and I think the day before. Fear could be a very positive thing. Because, for instance, fear would make you not do something stupid, But in that particular incident, I wasn't operating out of fear. I wasn't operating. I was just there. I was just there. By the grace of God, And I guess I was glad to stand in that vermin-infested hole because I was alive.
Yes.
But I came very close to not being alive.
Okay, thank you. Sudarshan, we should probably take our break pretty soon. Did you want to?
No, I think maybe after the break we
Good.
can get him.
Thank you, Prathia.
Thank you.
We're going to take a break for about 15 minutes. And then come back and continue the conversation with our sister with any questions that you want to ask her as well.